We'd like to bring up our third storyteller. Katie is here to reflect on the jillions of ways that she's created connection, both as a parent, a worker, an everyday person. Katie's got a lot of experience in this department. Take it away.
Megan, thank you. It's already been just so wonderful to be listening to everybody else's stories. And I think it's a great tradition to start having space stories. It's about the future. So I thought I'd share some of mine. There is nothing like blasting off into space for a 6-month expedition to the International Space Station to make you think about what is the meaning of far and what is the meaning of near, and how do we make connections when we're in these places. I loved actually almost every minute of my time on the space station. Might even have stayed longer. Actually, I would have if I could. And I did miss my family a lot. I missed being with my family. But, I think there's ways to find a way to be together. So I'd like you to bring you to the space station. For me, nighttime, late at night, was my favorite time, where I'd have already finished work, I've eaten dinner, gotten ready for the next day, talked to my family, and pretty much the rest of the crew is either maybe asleep, but it's my time to go to the cupola and say one last, good night to the Earth, and maybe a good night to the space station too. And so I would crack open my cabin door and I would give myself a push, and I'd do that long glide down the laboratory. It's lit in twilight at nighttime. And I'd come into node 1 and I'd sort of hook a right, go into node 3. That's where some of the really important stuff is, which is the treadmill, the weightlifting machine, the all important bathroom, and then straight on up into the cupola, which is our sort of domed set of windows to be able to look out at the Earth and at space. And when I was there, I loved looking at the curve of the Earth, because then there's just no question. You are in a spaceship and you are orbiting the Earth. And then if you look down, to me, it was pretty neat to think about, what everybody was doing down there, and just wondering, how life was, and wondering if they understood that I just really wasn't that far away. And in fact, it's the times that I felt the most close to Earth, really. Some of my favorite moments up there in the cupola would be when I'd look at the world map and I'd realize that we're going to go over my home in Massachusetts. And so I would call my husband and my son and tell them what time. They would run out into the yard. We live in Western Mass, so it's really a great dark sky. And I knew that they'd be down there looking up at the sky, at the stars, and you're looking to see, is that one moving? No, not that, not that. And then suddenly one of them, and it's going to be the brightest one, is just sailing across the sky. And that would be the space station. And I'd be in the space station looking down, waving, and knowing that they're waving at me. And it just was a really special moment. And we still actually go out in the backyard and see the space station and think about the folks that are up there. And I really urge you to do it, because it just really connects you to that place when you realize that there's just really people up there. Well, I'm actually no stranger to trying to figure out how to be close to people because I'm far away. And that is because I commuted between Houston and Massachusetts for 24 years, a really, really long time. And when you work in all the training that we do, the reason for that is that I found a wonderful guy that I fell in love with and got married to in Massachusetts. And yet I didn't really want to give up my cool job. So I commuted for a really long time. And somehow we just made that, our way of life. And it included training around the world, at different places for different missions, a couple weeks in an underwater habitat, like Nicole mentioned, and then even a few months in Antarctica, about 200 miles from the South Pole, in a tent. And I am not a camping girl, okay? I'm just going to make that very clear. But wherever I was in the world, and however far away I was, if I went outside at night and I looked at the moon, it just made me, and knowing that Josh and Jamie could go and be looking at the very same moon, and that together, we're joined together right there. And it just made us feel closer. It's a little trickier in Antarctica because the sun never went down, but that was problematic. After all these time zones that I was in, my husband used to say that he really loved it when I finally made it to the space station and was going to stay there a good long time, because then he knew exactly where I was, because there's an app for that. So to each their own. Well, when I was up there on the space station, one of the things that it becomes really clear is that you really can't go home, but you can stay connected. And for me, having a way to call my family, not just like once a week or something, but whenever I wanted, was perfect. And we had an internet protocol phone, and we could call almost, all day long, except of course, we're too busy working for that. But I talked to my family probably every day, except for about 3 out of 159. And it sounds really great until you think about a phone call with a 10-year-old. And so you go, "Hey, sweetie, how are you?" "Good." "Well, and so how was your day?" "Good." And so it's not as perfect as it might seem. And at the same time, just nice to be in touch. But also what we did, and I really learned it during training, was we would read books aloud together almost every night. And I think it just gave us a place to be together and not really have to sort of do anything. And our favorite book was Peter and the Starcatchers. And I think it was because in that book, it's like the life of Peter Pan before Peter Pan. So people are flying, all the rules are different. And I think that he and I got to explore that world together. We also had video conferences once a week. And that was really this huge privilege, because there's something about video. And if you ever have the chance, I mean, I know we get into just being on the phone, but often video just gives you more clues about how people really are, what they're doing, how they seem. So I loved these video conferences, and I would often bring my son's little Hobbs. This is a little tiger. I don't know if you're familiar with Calvin and Hobbes. It's a cartoon where it's a boy and his tiger, and they're quite adventurous. They love to explore, and they're crazy about space. So of course they go to Mars, in one of the books. And so I would have Hobbs up on the space station, and I would actually take him and send him. That's kind of our space verb, sending. I would send him down the module under the ever watchful cameras of mission control, wondering if anybody just noticed this little tiger sort of sailing by. So I would get to tell Jamie about these exploits. And Hobbs was really a favorite of ours, but it was a favorite of the crew as well, because if we ever made like a really big mistake, we would, of course, fess up, except that we would blame it on the tiger, bad tiger. So I'll never forget. I mean, I don't know. I think we love exploration in our family, and our son came to us, and he had a backpack, and in his backpack he had a sandwich, he had an apple, and he had a toy. And he goes, "Mom and Dad, I'm going to go explore, and I'll be back when I'm done." Which I just thought was, I mean, I think that's pretty neat that he would have that kind of spirit. And truthfully, I hoped that he realized that, his mom went off to explore a lot, and that she always came back as well. Well, our space family is really a special thing as well. So we have sort of Earth family, but then space family. And with space family, there's actually a different challenge, which is not the distance, but in some ways the closeness. And often people think that we are put together as a crew of 6 because we're going, we're each, going to be compatible. Oh, they'll like working with them. That'll be really nice. It's a myth. It just can't be true. Mostly just logistics. We need somebody who's doing spacewalks, somebody with robotics and science, whose turn it is, what country's turn it is to send astronauts. And when you put that whole equation together, we're going to have 6 people that are actually all there for the same mission. And that is truly the saving grace, because we all have different kinds of traits that may or may not be attractive to the others. I myself am talkative, and somehow not everybody appreciates how very special that is to have somebody talkative with them all the time. But we had, luckily, the space station itself, you might think it's small, but it's actually big. It's huge. We have 2 bathrooms. We have 2 kitchens, a ton of laboratories, and you can actually work there all day if you and not see other people, if you're really sort of off in one corner of the station or not. But we often would come together for meals. And I think that there was a lot of diplomacy and ways that we connected over food. I would say the most important things to really keep in mind or to think about were there was meat, there was the good coffee, and there was chocolate. Now, as someone who is not a really big meat fan, that meant that I had a very special strategic advantage in this equation. But I called this steak for borscht diplomacy, because food was just something that we all kind of had could joke around about. And the other thing that I thought would be hard, but turned out to be actually easy, was what are we going to do together when we're not working that we can all enjoy when we have 6 people and 4 countries and 5 languages. And I mean, it just doesn't seem like you could find a movie or a TV show that would really work for everybody. But then there it was, American Idol, and everyone had opinions. Well, I think things like food and TV might seem silly or like they don't matter, but I think they're actually the sort of beginning of the fabric of weaving a crew together. And excuse me, during our time on the space station, there's something that happened for us that I think probably changed all of us forever. And that was that our crewmate Paolo Nespoli lost his mom unexpectedly due to illness. And we don't go to space with sort of a manual about how to, how to help each other, really. And this may be something that you feel at home too, with all the things that we're going through. And we really wanted to support Paolo. So I went to him and I just said, Paolo, we'd like to help. What can we do? And he said, I'm actually, I'm okay. I mean, I wish I could be there, but I understand that I can't. And, I'm okay here. But what is hard for me is that down on the ground, I think it's really hard for my family and for my friends. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to really just let them know, I see you. I am there with you. So our crew took the sort of job on to help arrange a way for Paolo to actually speak at his mom's funeral from the space station. And at the right time, we gathered in the cupola, we held hands, and we had the mission controls from around the Earth or around the world were all together as well. Paolo made some really moving statements about his mom, and we had a moment of silence all together. And then amazingly, the space station went directly over Paolo's hometown in Italy. So it just seemed like fate. And, like our other speakers, I think one of my points is that, we're also connected to the Earth. And even if you go further away, there's still those things that tie you together. And for us, especially with our ground team, it's that way. They're an extension of our space family, and they're just as much a part of the mission as any of the astronauts. I was especially close to mission control in Japan because I was the second person to capture one of their supply ships from the space station using the robotic arm and then sticking it on the space station. And Nicole Stott, who just spoke earlier, was the very first one to do this. And I will never forget when we went to mission control, when Nicole, that was her introduction to the Japanese mission control team. We walked in and just spontaneously, they all rose with one motion and out. And I still get chills just thinking about it. And in that very moment, I knew that I would never be capturing a supply ship by myself because we were one team. So Nicole's crew captured the very first. Kunatori is the name of the supply ship, which means white crane. And so she captured the very first one, and then it was Paolo's and my turn. And that 16-ton supply ship silently approached the space station. And it was just magnificent, but also, I have to say, scary. I mean, we knew, and because we're in the cupola, we're looking out, we're there at the robotics workstation, we're about to go on the controls. And I mean, we knew it would be big. We just didn't know it would be like that big. And I'm actually, I don't know if you'll think it's funny, but I'm often reminded of this sign that you'll see on rearview mirrors. Sometimes it say, objects in the mirror may be larger than they appear. So it was really, I don't know, for us, it was a moment, but we got ourselves together. And actually, I think that's one of the things, like Emmanuel talked about, where you really have to be honest with your crewmates and make sure that you're really, really each other all ready. And so we were together. We were ready. And we took the robotic arm, started in, going towards the spacecraft, 2 pins, 1 pin, over the pin, and capture of the Kounotori spacecraft. There were cheers, there were celebrations, great relief on my part as the operator of the robotic arm. And then we brought it on board. It takes longer to do this, but unpacking, taking out the very coveted care packages from home, as well as supplies and experiments and all those things. But it was really just such a proud day and something that we'd done all together. And now that happens, practically like a couple of times a month. That happens up on our space station. And so I'm very proud that Nicole and I were amongst the first to help figure out how to do that, and with such a great team. Well, a few weeks later, after the capture, the unthinkable happened, and that is that a tsunami struck Japan. It was unbelievable. More than 20,000 people died. Mission control was damaged. There were so many people working in mission control, either themselves or their families were affected by this great tragedy. And it was just simply devastating. And it was hard for us to figure out, how can we just go about our day as if like as if everything's the same, when clearly life is so different for so many people that we care about down there. And one of the things that we did in wanting to help was we took every picture that we could of Japan at night, during the day, every time, trying to sending those pictures down, because they served as data for engineers, scientists, people around the world to try to understand the state of the damage in Japan. But we wanted to do more. And we went to our Japanese colleagues and just said, how can we help? And they came back with a very special plan. I told you the name of the supply ship is Kounotori, and it stands for White Crane. Well, they asked us to gather, all of us on the crew, gather in the Japanese module, Japanese part of the space station, and make these origami white cranes, um, basically we would make these white cranes, and to video this process, because these white cranes and the fact that the space program was going strong and was something that Japan was rightfully so very proud of. So we were excited about helping with this project. And I do have to share that we were a little daunted when they sent us 19 pages of directions, but they were very clear directions, and it all turned out okay. But I actually have to share that the only thing, and this is from experience, the only thing worse than doing math in public is actually doing origami in public. But I think some of these white cranes are still up on the space station, and it meant really so very much to all of us to know that we were contributing to the mission back down there on the ground, and to find out that the videos that we took were played on billboards across Japan during the rebuilding to provide a sense of hope during the rebuilding. From afar, but not apart. I think that's us. I loved coming home and being back on Earth, but I also, it means a lot to me to bring myself back up onto the space station and go back to some of those moments before bedtime, looking out the cupola window, looking out at Earth, looking out at space, and knowing, looking down there, that it's just so clear to me that there are so many connections that each of us could make with each other, so very many, and that each of us ourselves could make an infinite number of connections. And regardless of whether you're far from people you love or very close to people you love, there's always that moon, our moon. And I love that we see the same moon. Thank you.